The ANC's National Executive Committee meets for a regular meeting this weekend. Some in the party are hopeful that the meeting will produce an interesting roadmap towards the future of the governing party. At the same time, different factions are preparing themselves to make arguments for and against a series of issues, including the fate of the party's Secretary-General, Ace Mahashule. The Integrity Commission, an unpopular instruction by the ANC's top officials for members of the parliament to vote in favour of a Democratic Alliance-sponsored motion on the public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane, and the state of the party's various structures in all provinces. To discuss this more, we're now joined by analyst and author of Precarious Power, Compliance and Discontent under Ramaphosa's ANC, Susan Boyson. Susan, a very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I suppose the first question I'd like to ask is for you to take us a little through the title of that book that we just spoke of. What inspired it?
Certainly. You know, it is these dichotomies and contradictions of the ANC we see around us all the time that inspired it. For example, we see that there's an ANC that is so undermined by itself, embarrassed by itself, and have so vacillated on its 2017, 2019 promises also to the electorate of South Africa to really definitively reform the organization against corruption. And yet it has been unable, as this NEC will also testify to, and hopefully the outcome will be more definitive, but the topics of this NEC testify to the fact that they have not been able to act so definitively. And so despite all of these contradictions and problems, the ANC remains a dominant power, the dominant political party, even if it's somewhat lapsing in political and electoral support. And it is these contradictions, understanding these, that inspired me to write this book.
Now, you've called it Precarious Power, and Precarious is defined as likely to fall or collapse. Is this what we're seeing now? It certainly appears a little bit shaky.
It is shaky indeed. You know, I take precarious a little bit broader than that, and that means unsteady, possibly tiptoed over, but yet also balanced, very, very dangerously balanced as to whether it will make that grade and whether it can transform itself and redeem itself. The jury remains out on that, even if the evidence varies from day to day. So I still give it a chance that it can redeem itself, but it is fragile. It is so difficult. And the ANC, on the one hand, can also with difficulty act in its own interest because the counter-interest is embedded in the ANC, and that is opposing factions. And then the question arises, will the ANC split again? And it cannot really afford to split. It cannot afford to split again, not to split. Because once it splits again, if it is a significant split, compared with just a minor split off, a significant split would push the ANC below the 50% threshold of electoral support in many of the administrations. And then the ANC almost loses its reason for existence because so much of its power, and this I argue in Precarious Power as well, so much of existence is fused with the agencies and the frameworks of the state. The apparatuses of the state help deliver to the ANC patronage, rewards to its members. 25, 26, 7, 8 years after democracy, that is what often inspires membership and loyalty. A certain type of loyalty to the ANC rather than a deep commitment to the old type of struggles. So the ANC cannot afford to hold some of these factions and undermining factions, sabotaging factions, ANC factions that really sabotage the main body. They cannot afford to hold them in, and that is what much of, I believe, this NEC is about. But equally, if they let them go, if they push them out, or allow them to ripen and fall their way to the ground, then it is possible that the ANC might fall below the 15 outright electoral majority marks. And we know what kind of instability that brings once these municipalities and potentially other places embark on coalition government.
Well, it's pretty interesting that ANC members in Parliament are to vote in favour of a DA motion. Uncharted territory, what is this likely to do to this ship that's on choppy waters, so to speak, at the moment?
Yes, it is precarious indeed that the ANC could vote in favour of a motion by an opposition party. In the past, they have not fallen far from that line when, for example, on Section 25 of the Constitution on land, it voted essentially with a motion proposed by the EFF, but then introduced its own slightly modified version of that and could vote for that. And it was also a few years ago on Jacob Zuma, when they tried to get him out of power to resign, then as president of the country, that it was also opposition-initiated motions, a motion in Parliament that was not carried, but which got a significant amount of ANC support. The instruction at that time, however, was not to vote with the motion. It was under protest that many other members did vote for that. But it's somewhat uncharted territory, but there have been examples like that before, vaguely similar. But then it is such an important moment for the ANC now, and it also speaks to this weakness in the ANC, the fragility, that the ANC has come to the point where it does have to, almost of necessity, to redeem itself, vote for that motion that was originally introduced by the DA.
Well, speaking of issues around redemption, the ANC in the Eastern Cape implementing the step-aside resolution, and we know that this has been a thorn in the side of the ANC.
Yes, and that is probably one of the topics that will be very hotly debated at this NEC meeting. It is as if the ANC in the Eastern Cape is trying to lead the way, is showing that there are examples of this being implemented, because this Secretary General Ace Magashule, who is contesting that a definitive decision like that was actually taken at the ANC's February meeting this year, just a month ago. And so there is movement of, at least from that province on that front. Magashule has been arguing in the interim that it is not valid, that there was no such decision, and that it still has to go to the branches, which by all indications of what that NEC in February NEC decision actually was that it had been decided to do that, and it had not been decided that we must first go to the branches. So the Eastern Cape is probably trying to set the tone for discussions, amongst others, in a body like the NEC.
So we are aware that this weekend there will be discussion on the terms of reference for the Integrity Commission. If you were a fly on that wall, what do you think you would hear?
Oh, it's going to be so contested. The first one, I don't even know whether it will be discussed, but it should be discussed. The fact that the Integrity Commission is really a sub-body of the National Executive Committee. Its decisions always have to be referred back to the NEC, and the NEC will always say, yes, we pass that. And we know from experience in the last year, 2 years, of what has happened to many of these recommendations from the Integrity Commission that have been referred to the NEC. They get diluted, they get waylaid, they get parked along the side, and just no effective decisions have been implemented following quite definitive recommendations by the Integrity Commission. And so I think there will be a big debate, push and pull, to try to give the Integrity Commission more powers so that it can implement, give it a mandate directly from the NEC, but then to give them the powers to actually to act and to be definitive in the actions that they have. Unless they get that kind of power, it is not going to be easy for the NEC to move along, because each and every meeting will then be delayed and softened, kicked down the road, that kind of kicked down the road, and definitive actions will be very, very sparse, and it will not be an indication that the ANC 2017, 2019 type of electoral mandate has really been given feet.
Susan, final question, quick one if you can. It is clear that there are different factions in the ANC. The upcoming local government elections on the horizon, are we likely to see it evident in how people vote?
I certainly think that the ANC will have an eye on the ball and of opinion polls and solid opinion polls that they have relied on quite a bit in their political planning, and to see how voters are reacting. And that could be quite definitive. We know in 2017 in the Nasrec decisions to vote out Jacob Zuma's faction in the form of NDZ and put Ramaphosa in, that was really inspired by indications from the opinion polls that the ANC stands a good chance to lose its national outright majority by then, still in the forthcoming 2019 elections, should they stay with a Zuma-associated candidate. And that was enough then to help sway many of the delegates at that conference. It is quite possible that such data is available again. If it is available and if it points in the same direction, I believe it will help give the Ramaphosa faction the push and the confidence to put its foot down on the Magashule or so-called Radical Economic Transformation faction, and Magashule and his followers put a foot down and say, toe the line or get out. It will be very difficult for the ANC of the current orientation to take that type of a strong stand. But should there have been indications from opinion polling, reliable opinion polling, that shows that it is downhill to below 50%, if that type of action is not taken, the ANC will definitely be very, very tempted to act more definitively. The ANC will also, of course, be very mindful of its own organizational structures, because it can go by big opinion polls and indications that it will win elections if they take certain steps, but yet there could still be rebellions from its own ranks. And we know the ANC has really swelled its membership handsomely by current unverified indications to about 1.4 million. And that is a huge increase that would have been affected then under the leadership of Magashule in the Office of the Secretary General. We do not know to what extent Deputy Secretary General Desiduarte, what kind of role she would have played, pro or anti, that type of mobilization. But it's quite possible that the Secretary General has lined up quite a number of supportive branches. And the ANC will have to take a very calculated decision, also given the forthcoming National General Council, a virtual one possibly, that is scheduled for late May, a mere 2 months from now, at which there can be disruptive action against the Ramaphosas should they effectively try to act against the RETs.
Susan, lovely to hear your thoughts this evening. That was Susan Boyson, analyst and author of Precarious Power, Compliance and Discontent under Ramaphosa's ANC.